Hello and welcome to the School of Nursing. This is our 66th annual Clare Dennison lecture. So we are very excited to kick off Meliora weekend with the Clare Dennison lecture and all the activities that are going to be on campus. For those of you who don't know me, I am Dean. I'm Lisa Kitko. It is so nice to see so many familiar faces coming back on campus every year. And I do want to give a special shout out to all of the facilities, IT, and operations. As you know, Helenwood Hall is aging like we all are, right? So we have significant construction going on above us. So it took a little coordination of it. You're fine. They're doing the roof. So we have significant construction going on above us. So it took a little bit of coordination to pull the event off. And I guess I'll also give that team credit for getting us a beautiful weekend. So hopefully you are here and you are going to enjoy many activities throughout the day and the weekend here on campus. It just looks beautiful. So when I start this off, I always have to say Meliora weekend is one of my favorite parts of being on campus. But then I look back and, a few weeks ago, we welcomed new students and I told them, gosh, this is my favorite part of being here. And then just a week prior to that, we were graduating students at our pinning ceremony. And I think I said the same thing. So I think the theme going through this, it's just a great time to be in the School of Nursing. We are doing great things and just very happy to be here and be part of the faculty and staff. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Clare Dennison. Miss Clare Dennison was appointed in 1931 to succeed Miss Helen Wood. And I was hearing stories this morning about Miss Helen Wood, right, during her time here. Miss Dennison retired in 1951, concluding her long era of leadership, both for the School of Nursing and in the development and administration of nursing services at Strong Memorial Hospital. As Director of Nursing Service, a title that replaced Superintendent in 1947. Ms. Dennison is remembered for starting one of the first recovery rooms in the nation. Our alumni remember her as being an avid supporter of advanced education, the gardens at Helenwood Hall, and the tradition of the tea in the afternoons in what is now known as Everett's Lounge, where we will be enjoying our lunch after this lecture. For the School of Nursing, this lecture, named in memory of Ms. Dennison, is an opportunity to invite nursing professionals who are leaders in the field to share their work with our faculty, students, alumni, and friends. And I know that you will enjoy today's lecture. It is now my honor and pleasure to introduce our 66th Clare Dennison lecturer, Patricia Larrabee. Pat, would you join me at the podium? So before I turn over the podium, I want to tell you a little bit about Pat, and she is going to tell us much more about her career. Pat is an adult nurse practitioner and received her master's degree from the University of Rochester in 1977. So we're very honored to call her an alum after attending SUNY Brockport for her bachelor's degree. Pat was the CEO and founder of Rochester Clinical Research, an organization that conducts FDA-approved phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical research trials as part of the drug development process. And Pat started this company over 30 years ago. This month?
Their 30th anniversary.
Oh my goodness. So truly an innovator and an entrepreneur well beyond your years, Pat. Rochester Clinical Research is a local company with global impact. The company employs 72 professional medical, nursing, and administrative support staff and retains 5 on-site physicians who serve as principal investigators. Founded in 1994, RCR has recruited over 20,000 patient volunteers and completed over 1,100 clinical research trials across multiple areas of therapeutic focus. RCR was involved in numerous COVID-19 trials in 2020 and adopted multiple new technologies to adapt to the environment at the time and complete clinical trials during the pandemic. In 2023, RCR joined with Atlas Clinical Research to form a national source of clinical research sites dedicated to quality clinical research. Pat currently serves as consultant to Atlas and is a board member of the network. Nationally, Pat is a member of the Society of Clinical Research Sites and a member of the Site Advisory Group for TransAccelerate. Pat also serves on the National Advisory Council for the School of Nursing. Thank you, Pat. She has been active on the boards of Mary Cariola Center, Heritage Christian Services, and serves as a member of the Women's President Organization. Pat resides in Rochester and is the proud nana to 9 grandchildren and that her 3 adult children are raising, and she is also an avid quilter. Please give me a very warm welcome to a very good friend and colleague of the School of Nursing, class of 1977 alumna, Miss Patricia Larrabee.
Thank you, Dean Kitko. I'm honored to be here today in such prestigious company. It's exciting to be able to share a little bit of my story with you today.
I think they're having a hard time.
Maybe move the mic over.
The mic has to be moved over.
Actually, I have a portable guy that's supposed to work. I'm just fixing it. How's that? Is that any better? All right. So this summer, when we were watching the Olympics, I was beginning to prepare this talk. And I was looking at the athletes do the superhuman efforts that they do every day as they prepare for the competitions with world records and amazing superhuman feats. And I was thinking, there's a lot of parallels with nursing and with life in terms of the strength we need to accomplish the things that nurses do every day. And my son at the time, when I told him I was going to talk about it, he said, the Olympics will be over. It's history. And actually, I disagreed with him because you know what? The Olympics aren't prepared for in one day and just over. Every day, you continue to work towards that. And that's true for nursing as well. You're not done with school and done. You're going. So I'm focusing on the quality of the efforts that are needed to achieve excellence. These are the keys, I think, to a successful career. You have to optimize skills and use them in the best possible ways. And that's been the cornerstones of my approach to both nursing and clinical research. I look back on a career that evolved from a staff nurse at Rochester General to graduate school in the brand new nurse practitioner program to starting a clinical trials research company. It's been both a marathon and I think even a triathalon sometimes. I hope to share some of these stories and tell you a little bit about what it's been like to go for the gold. I think of the bronze as the foundation. And if you think about it, bronze as a metal is actually stronger than either silver or gold. And you need a solid beginning for a strong career. You may be familiar with the work of Angela Duckworth. She's a psychologist and educator, and she's coined the term grit as a key trait of success and happiness in life. In her book and her TED Talks, if you want to take the shortcut, her theory about grit talks about how the traits of passion and persistence are what lead to success and excellence. Not so much intelligence or innate skills, but really the passion and the persistence, perseverance, and the drive to succeed. And I think these traits and descriptors are seen in successful Olympians, successful nurses, and successful people in life. Really working towards a defined goal. That's the other key of the theory of grit, is that you have to have a single goal that you work towards. And excellence in all things seem to be associated more with grit than almost any other trait. She talks about how to score grit, how to teach grit, and how to raise your family with grit, so it's really a fascinating person to listen to. One of the things that she mentions is that you need to commit to daily dedication to mundane tasks to get better at them. So that's something we forget. I think as we go along, we think when we're doing something and trying to do it better, that it may not matter, the little steps you take. But each step you do is key to success, I think. Even with elite athletes, you have to be willing to work hard, to learn from expert coaches, and have constant improvement. And I think those are some of the keys, seeking out experts in your field for coaching and for how to get better at what you're doing. When I think of the silver for the requirements for a nurse, one of the first things that comes to mind is mastery of the basics, nursing education and professional skills. When I was looking back at my nursing education and thinking about today, I was in the 3rd class for the bachelor's program at SUNY Brockport. And you might be a little nervous about entering a new program. Is it certified? It wasn't yet. Are the faculty any good? Do they know what they're talking about? What was unfortunate was we had excellent faculty and an excellent education. What also was fascinating to me is that more than 50% of the peers in our undergraduate program went on to get their master's degree. So obviously those nursing educators laid foundations for us, for asking questions, to think critically, to be curious, and to constantly want to learn. And what more could you achieve as nursing educators in terms of working for that and your students? I worked as a staff nurse at Rochester General for just a year, rotating shifts, nights, weekends. I did not adapt well to that night shift. I wanted to crawl into every empty bed I saw. And that's not acceptable. I was really a zombie, so it wasn't really I knew that hospital nursing with the rotating shifts and nights was not going to be an option for me, and I couldn't wait to get the tenure that you needed to have at that time to get off the rotating. So I was going to do something else. I read an article in the paper about actually, first what happened is I looked online for another job, and I found, probably wasn't online in 77, I misspoke. I looked for a position, and if there was a county had a hiring on visiting nurse. I thought visiting nurse would be great. Be out of the hospital mainly days, could do some weekends, I can handle that, but it wasn't an option. So then I thought, what am I going to do now? It's August. I opened the newspaper, the Democrat and Chronicle back in the day, when we read a paper every day, and in the local section there was a little tiny article in the column that said there was a Robert Wood Johnson Foundation program beginning for a new role for nurses at the U of R starting in September. This was in August, I think the middle of August. I applied for the position, for the program. I didn't know what a nurse practitioner was when I applied, because we were fortunate to have Dean Ford bring the program from Colorado here, and it was still very new. There probably were only a few hundred in the country that had started at Colorado briefly and then came here, and I think this was the 3rd class for the NP program as well. And I went in and was interviewed by Jean Garling, and I remember her asking me why I wanted to be a nurse practitioner. And my first thought was, if I knew what it was, I probably could answer this a little better. I had no idea. I think I mumbled something about primary care nursing and tried to sound like something that made sense, but they accepted me anyways, which I was grateful for. The best part about the program was that it was fully paid for by the foundation. And we actually got a stipend to go to graduate school. And it was a full 24 months, which was wonderful because we had solid clinical experience during the summer months. And I had the most amazing faculty. Maddie Schmidt, Harriet Kitzman, Paul Hatton-Goldridge, Mary Ouimet, Nancy Kent, Jean Garling, the list goes on of just incredible faculty. And more than we could, best coaches anyone could ask for a team. They taught us to question, to think critically, to analyze research, and that began another step on the solid journey toward the solid foundation, acquiring the skills that have served us well through long careers. It was really a memorable and transformative experience for me, I have to say. And I have to give kudos to the educators. Where would we be without the nursing educators that we had for graduate and undergraduate school? And if you're thinking, anybody is still thinking about choosing their career here or changing their career, we need you for nursing education. Look at what's happening. Our future nurses, our future nurse practitioners, our future nurse entrepreneurs need you. We really underestimate the importance of the work that nursing educators do to every day and the impact it has for the future of nursing. It's estimated by the World Health Organization that there will be a shortage of 4.5 million nurses by the year 2030. Think about that. That's a little scary number, and that's only 5 years away. We got to get going. So I think if anybody knows somebody who might be a good mentor or educator, they'd encourage them to go into nursing education. Is that a good pitch for Dean? Lisa, that'll help, right?
Yeah.
Really, when you think about that, the silver medal reflects, to me, represents the education that I was given and the foundation one needs for true success. The wisdom imparted from faculty to mold the way we think and approach a problem, review a protocol, understand a disease. Without that, we have nothing. There we are, back in the day. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, that was a true gift. When you think about the gold medal, to me it represents excellence. And again, that's a cornerstone. I was instilled with the belief that if a task is worth doing, it's worth doing it well. So this led to a commitment to quality in all the things that I undertook, and I think it's another key foundational aspect for both the Olympics and for life. So the mission and vision for RCR was developed with Rochester Clinical Research, was developed with excellence in mind. It's important to have a clear vision of a company's mission. You need, and ours has always been focused on quality. If you're going to do it well. And that, to me, meant sort of a three-legged stool, 3 prongs to that stool, one being it needed to be a quality, fun place to work. You have to retain staff and people and have them want to be there and want to do their best. So it meant friendly family environments where we support each other, do our best work, celebrate our successes and our failures, and celebrate each other. The second key part, or probably the most important part, was quality care for our volunteers. These study volunteers, accommodate them as best we can. They're donating their time to research, and we don't get advances in medicine without that donation of time. So we really have to change the mindset when sometimes folks, we're used to coming from clinical care, the sickest come first and people might wait. In research, the volunteers don't wait, and you can't have them wait. You have to be expedient and take care of them and make them comfortable. There's some scary stories about research, and people have misconceptions about. Because of history, there's good reasons for some of the conceptions. There's not always been a good treatment of particular minority and diverse groups have been treated poorly. So we have to combat that as well. Honor their time and take the best care we can of our volunteers. And the key other leg of the stool is the quality data. If the data we collect is not accurately reported or collected in adherence to the protocol, we haven't done our job. So that's really an important part of our data, our work. So the core value is what we stood for. I'll talk more about technology as we go along. When I first graduated with my master's degree, I was working as a nurse practitioner at the Wilson Health Center in primary care. And it was a terrific HMO model back in the day of the late 70s that had a truly collaborative model with nurse practitioners, dietitians, psychologists, MSWs, MDs, specialists, all in one group. It was the classic Kaiser Permanente model that worked beautifully for a number of years, and then insurance and things got in the way and it sort of fell apart, as it tends to with insurers involved sometimes. I also found it difficult to work in primary care and start a family. I was having children and trying to raise kids and be in primary care is really challenging. So I went to a seminar one day where I was giving a lecture on relaxation techniques and hypertension management as a tool. And I met Joe Izzo, who was one of the nephrologists in hypertension here at the university for many years. And he offered me a job after that conference and as a nurse practitioner doing hypertension consults and clinical trials. And so I started a path down. It was a part-time job at the time, which was perfect fit, and it was really a kind of a 8 to 5 kind of job, so it was easier to have a family. So it worked as a really good way to achieve some balance for me. And I found it easier to learn a lot about one area and be an expert in that than to try and know a lot about everything, which is what primary care has to do. It's really challenging in primary care to stay on top of that and get it done in a reasonable day. That's why we see a shortage of physicians and folks going into primary care. It's a pretty challenging world. So during this time, we were doing clinical trials, and we added a sub-study to each trial. It was the phase of time when categories of drugs such as ACE inhibitors, angiotensin receptor blockers, and calcium channel blockers were all being developed, all brand new mechanisms of action. Prior to that time, in the early 80s, all we had was basically beta blockers and diuretics as a treatment, and we knew how they worked. We did not really understand how these drugs worked, though. So at the time, what we did was we would develop there was a protocol that the pharmaceutical company needed to get this compound approved by the FDA, and we would add a sub-study and be able to examine all the hemodynamic profiles. So we would do catecholamine assays, exercise testing, cardiac output, rebreathing measurement, and basically it was me doing all that with these folks and run the samples in our lab, the plasma and aldosterone. So we really had a very comprehensive hemodynamic profile of how every antihypertensive works in real people, which is kind of exciting and fun to be a part of developing that. I learned a lot about clinical research. Let's see, I'm not sure if we're going. So, and at this time, the model for a clinical research study coordinator was the coordinator does everything. Typically a nurse, she finds the patients, she finds the regulatory documents, she does the budget, she does the lab, she does the pharmacy, every single step of it. And so pretty much every aspect. Some of which I was good at and some not so much. I had one patient who called me Painless Pat, somewhat sarcastically, I think. He did not like my blood draw technique. When he had to have that line in for a long time and do all that exercise stuff, he was not happy. But anyhow, that led me to think about some new ways of how to accomplish the same job. Can we look at another way of getting a problem done? So after about 9 years working together, Dr. Izzo left for the University of Buffalo, and I had a trial that was about to start. So I approached the chief physician at the Wilson Health Center, Dr. Wersinge, where I had worked before, and suggested that we start a research division, because I thought there might be some ways we could do this a little bit easier. Dr. Fred Karsh, many of you may remember, was a pharmacologist and an internist who was working at the Wilson Center at that time, and I thought he'd be a perfect investigator on the clinical trials that we were going to start doing. So and you actually may remember his wife, Amy Karsh. I believe her pharmacology text is still in use. Unfortunately, both Fred and Amy are no longer with us, but they did some incredible work together. The division was small, and we expanded, though, from seeing just hypertension to other areas of research, and it kept growing. Then the medical group merged with another medical group, and they did not see the value in clinical research. They felt it was a distraction to primary care. It was the only division that was in the black, so it seemed like a good idea. Get rid of it. Which is not, I don't always understand that thinking, but it worked out well. I said to Dr. Versini, let's do this on our own because they don't seem to want us. And he said, you do it, I'm too busy. So I said, okay, you come work for me and I'll do it. So we took the leap. There are certain advantages to independence, of course. I didn't have any business experience at this point in my career, but I was very familiar with the clinical research industry. I knew what the FDA required. I knew what the pharmaceutical industry needed. I knew what kind of support we had from the community, and I knew what the volunteers and how they felt about being in clinical research trials. We learned that most of our study volunteers really do it out of altruism. They do it because they have a friend or a relative with diabetes who's struggling, or they had a child who had RSV and was in the ICU, and they want to prevent that from happening to somebody else. Really, the majority of our volunteers, I would say well into the 80-90%, do it because they're trying to help the next generation of people. So we have a very altruistic community, I would say. And if you take good care of people, they will come back. We learned that we worked hard to accommodate their volunteers' time. And these people, again, deserve the best experience we can give them. And as with any new experience, you have to practice, whether it's a sport or research, and learn from what you do. When we first started, we talked about that. We met with the lawyer to get the company structure set up. And that physician, Dr. Wissing, and another practitioner we were working with at the time were hoping to be partners as we started the company. We knew there's a law in New York State that says different licensed professionals cannot own the same corporation, and you cannot be in the same structure. We knew that, but we hoped perhaps a partnership structure would work. The first lawyer said, yeah, I think you can do that. So we opened up with that structure. On day 3, she called and said, oops, you can't. I was wrong. So we kind of lost a little bit of faith in that lawyer and went to another lawyer. And the second lawyer was to determine, we wanted a structure, obviously, that was legal. It's really good to be legal, I think. It seemed like a good plan. And this lawyer primarily represented physicians. And she asked several questions, and the first thing she said was, well, clearly the doctor has to own the company. And she said a doctor can hire a nurse, but a nurse can't hire a doctor. And I said, can you show me what law says that and where? And she said, well, the FDA must care. And I said, nope, the FDA doesn't care. I'm pretty familiar with what they don't ask or have the authority to ask about the structure. What they care about is there's a contract between the FDA and the investigator and the nurses and the clinical staff that are on that study. It's called 1572. They care about that. But they don't have anything to do with the company structure behind it. And then she replied, well, the pharmaceutical company must care. Who owns the company? I said, no. They don't care. They want qualified staff. They want investigators with experience in research. And the MD I was working with at the time, Dr. Versini, did not want to own the company. He felt he was only going to be part-time, and he felt it was too much work to do. So he wanted to prefer to work as a contractual consultant. So we went to the third lawyer because we weren't getting very far. And actually, Kathy Donahoe, who's one of our people that may remember her name, she was one of our class, actually, Donna Willemy, also my class is here today. We did nickname ourselves the best and the brightest. That was Donahoe that did that in graduate school, in the first week of school. Not that, no, modesty was not our struggle, right? Anyhow, she recommended another lawyer who researched New York State law and said there isn't any law that says you cannot have a contractual relationship with a physician and a nurse. So we gave that lawyer a medal. I think he deserved it. So we opened in '94, September, and did all kinds of 1, 2, and 3 trials, as Dean Kitco mentioned. We're multi-therapeutic, so we would actually do trials in all kinds of areas, all outpatient areas, except oncology. We never touched oncology. It's not appropriate for an independent site, I don't think, to do that. We collaborated with area physicians and had our on-staff physicians who were contractual relationships. And we had physicians in primarily family practice, internal medicine. We have nurse practitioners, physician's assistants, and staff nurses, a wonderful group of nurses. We also work very closely with the primary care providers in the community. It's important to keep them in the loop. It's part of the process of research, so they know what's going on with their patients. And we referred to local institutions. Strong did a lot of our MRIs and x-rays for the studies that would require special tests. Most of the time the lab work is central lab, so we have to get familiar with shippers and all that good stuff. We've researched many of the common medicines that you run across today: Crestor, Xenical, PPIs, type 2, all the type 2 diabetes medicines that there are, I believe. We've also done device studies. We did the HIV home testing study, where it's really fun research to do. Birth control, erectile dysfunction studies, weight loss, and all the vaccines that are out there now, for everything from cholera to anthrax to RSV and COVID. And COVID was quite a time. We're in an old school building in Irondequoit. We have about 25,000 square feet of clinical space and a staff, as Dean mentioned, with nurses and pharmacists and a whole host of folks with support. And we have several clients. I look at it as a bunch of folks who, I talked about who cares. Here we go, I'm getting behind on the slides. I apologize for that. So our clients, the study volunteer is our first client in my mind, the person who comes in and volunteers the time. And the study sponsor, the second volunteer. The second, actually, client, I mean. So this is our people in our place. And we actually even did the Olympics one summer. So one of our fun, friendly environment things, we did a summer Olympics where we had kind of competitions and fun times. But we have a great staff of folks. It's really wonderful. We've worked with all the major pharma companies, though: Pfizer, Merck, Novartis, AstraZeneca, Abbott, Janssen, Moderna, and we have a special preferred provider relationships with many of them who will choose us first, give us a look at their pipeline and let us know whether we can do. And the key there is to choose studies that you can do and do them well. And knowing when it's either the study is not ethical or not the right fit for your population was really critical to our success, I think, too. So, the regulations for clinical trials are written by the FDA. We're closely monitored and evaluated by the FDA. They're published in the Federal Register. And the FDA requires the studies to be monitored by the sponsor as well periodically, which we're quite familiar to. We are subject to FDA audits. We've had 9 of them over our career, and the last one was just about a month ago, and the auditor said, just keep doing what you're doing. That's the only thing I have for you to say. So they're not always easy. The FDA inspectors come with a fraud detection background with the assumption that you're doing something wrong. That's really where they come from when they come to see you. And they select only about 5% of the clinical research sites get audited, but they choose the high enroller typically. So whoever has got the most patients in the study is going to be in a pivotal study that's about to go for approval. So the audits are often done 4 or 5 years after you finish the work. We actually had the FDA on site during COVID. They came because they couldn't fly, and they really knew this was mission critical work that we were doing, and they came and spent 2 weeks with us during the COVID while we were doing the study. And it was our first study we were doing in electronic source too, which was a bit of an experience, because I'll talk more about that in a minute. But over the years, we grew to be actually the largest independent clinical research site in the country, which kind of surprised me. Okay, so one of the premises that we've had for our workflow is the model I felt, as I talked about the traditional model, I felt you really needed to match the skills needed to the tasks that had to be done. So thinking about things differently, I did concepts to adopt that would create better job satisfaction and efficiencies. Centralizing the aspects of research that could be removed from the nurse or study coordinator, and starting with each step of the way. The regulatory documents, that's a work that requires attention to detail. And so we trained dedicated staff that were not clinically trained. You don't need a clinical background to know how to check boxes and fill in CVs, et cetera. But you needed people who could be familiar with the FDA guidelines and the IRB guidelines and the ethical review boards to make sure that everything was done properly, and who enjoyed that kind of work. It's very detailed work. And we created a regulatory team. The recruitment of the study volunteers, that's another key step, calling them to assess their interest in a trial. We created a call center model where you have folks with experience with the protocols that are trained by clinical staff, and then give them a script that tells them what information, so they're clear to give correct information to folks that's been approved by the IRB, that describes the research protocol and can assess their interest in participating. And, we found before, nurses are not great recruiters. They don't like to do that. Pick up the phone and calling people and leaving messages and getting hung up on, and having people who don't want to do it. It's not a good use of the skill set. So again, looking at it from what's the skill set you need to do the job, and who's the best person to do it. Data entry. There's a lot of data entry involved, and this industry is very tech phobic, I would say, again, in some regards. So we would have to put everything in one computer and then put it in another computer that's dedicated to them. So it's really data transfer. A not ideal way to collect data and not a great task for a nurse, in my opinion. So we created research assistants who would do the data entry and also help with tasks like getting lab kits ready and all that kind of stuff, trying to be the most efficient as possible. And we hired dedicated lab phlebotomists and lab techs. The processing for many of these studies get more and more complex. 18 tubes for a draw is not unusual, and then processing all that. To have that be the study coordinator's responsibility is kind of crazy. There's a new role that we created during the pandemic called patient engagement specialists. This was, we had 3 huge COVID trials that were ongoing at the same time. Each had 500 patients in them, so we were enrolling over 1,500 patients during that time. And the trials were all being done with brand new, just developed electronic tools that were not ready for prime time. But as I mentioned, this industry is a little slow to adopt technology. But as the result of the immediate and urgent need to have daily information in an electronic diary, they actually created a new app that was absolutely horrendous. And we would have to, the COVID trials required that we bring in all ages. So we had 85-year-olds. They had to come in and tell us their Apple ID. Did they know that? Probably not. And it was quite a frustrating. The apps were just terrible. We actually ended up finding workarounds. We were fortunate to find these young folks who, during COVID, they were recent graduates, many from here, who did not they were going on to graduate school for whether med school or whatever, and they were looking for a job at the time. So we hired a bunch of smart young digital natives who were able to figure out back ends around the terrible apps and make them work for us. But they also served as a built-in help desk for the patients. So for 2 years in these trials, people had to record daily in this diary that was electronic of all ages with all different levels of checkability themselves. And it would, in the screening visit, it would take probably a half an hour just to do that piece of it. And we're trying to see 100 patients in a day. So having these dedicated folks who could take them out of the exam room, take them and teach them how to use it has turned out to be a terrific model. They have actually helped the retention of all subjects in all our trials because they also would call them every week, because if you forget to do your data entry, you had to get a call. And that happens for any of the observational studies that we do. You have to call them every week to touch base and keep them. Retention in a long-term trial is key. We had one 7-year trial that we had 100% retention. And so we really work hard at keeping people into the trials. So that was really a win role. So they would, the patient engagement specialist would come in, set up the app, set up a new email for them if they had to. And we got really creative in those times, as we have to often. And it was a huge help. This saved a ton of time on the nurse. If they would speak to someone who had a clinical issue, they would then transfer the call to the nurse so they could take the clinical information. So we called them every week for 2 years to make sure they were healthy. And then you didn't want to miss any COVID symptoms because, again, as we all know, it can start very simple and people often dismiss some simple symptoms. So making sure we captured every data point was key. But this led to greater job satisfaction for the study coordinators, gave them the bandwidth to really focus on what we want a nurse to focus on. Know that protocol, know that patient, make sure you have all your T's crossed. So it was really a team effort, and it was designed to go for that medal together, use the skills you have in the best way possible. So the adversity of the pandemic really led to some creative problem solving for us and expanded how we approach challenges, which is always something to, always need to think of another way to solve a problem. So as I mentioned, the industry is really, this we talked about, I think. Let's see, oh, we talked about this too. Oh, did we? Oh, I think so. Okay. Oh, there's Dr. Fauci. We had a couple Zoom calls with him during the COVID pandemic, which was a lot of fun. Okay, so tools. So as I mentioned, this industry is really quite slow to adopt technology. I think there was always a fear of cybersecurity. So you spend so much money to develop a drug and have the risk of having the data be stolen. So that we were paper until the pandemic really forced the issue. Our medical director that I worked with, Dr. Versinier, I mentioned, was a very experienced medical group manager and was committed to quality and processes as well. And he really always encouraged us to seek out the best equipment and tools. So we piloted, that's an old motion tablet computer that 20 years ago we tried to use for data collection for our records. And we were trying to use optical character recognition, but it was not quite ready for prime time. So you can't give up on technology, though. You keep on trying. Being an early adopter works sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't. But laying the groundwork for setting the stage for building quality into the process is the key message here. We all know that if you standardize efforts, it leads to quality. So we adopted standardized tools for many things that we did, and making sure we had templates that we applied across the gamut of studies. There's a great deal of complexity in clinical trials, and that has just continued to increase. What first happens, most of our subjects came from actually community recruitment, from advertising. They respond to a call about a study. But over time, we built a database that's now approaching 50,000 people from folks who've inquired about a trial opportunity from Rochester and the 9-county area surrounding. But our database stores the basic health information, diagnoses, medications, and is searchable. We were looking at ways to expedite. We didn't have electronic scheduling, though. We really wanted to have that. So we hired you would think computers are made to do that. Put a window in for a protocol and dates. It's all numbers. It shouldn't be that hard. But there wasn't one that would work for our industry. So we hired a developer to build one. And after a year, he said, Microsoft has 30 guys working on this. I can't do it. So on a Friday, we gave up and said, I guess we're stuck with Excel and paper. And then on Monday, a local software company called Biotronics called us and said, would you like to be a beta site for a clinical trials management software system? And we said, yes, please. They actually had just finished a project here at the U of R working on the OR scheduling system and creating the barcode scanners to time point everything and increase the throughput for the OR surgery by 30%. So they were smart. Sometimes software developers can listen and hear what you're saying and actually do what you need. And sometimes they can't. It's what I've learned over time. And they happen to be ones who are really good at understanding what needed to happen. So their clinical trials management system called Clinical Conductor serves as our database, our scheduling program, our protocol tracker built in the windows. It tracked everything, financial accrual systems. So when a visit was completed, it automatically triggered the revenue generated with that. It also one of the key things you need to learn is how, when you're recruiting for subjects, some studies are much harder than others. What's the best way to get them in there? What worked? And you don't always know what works. Sometimes you try and do tick marks and think, well, I think that worked well. A newsletter would work great. But having data, you have to have data to know what you're doing. So what this software built in a system where if you just assigned the cost to whatever it was, assigned it to a study, it would automatically calculate and rank the effectiveness of each strategy. So is this a highly effective? Is Facebook the best for this study? So it was really data that you needed to be able to make decisions. So it was so key to what we're doing. So they were able to automate all that, and it was a wonderful tool. We ended up investing in the company to help them grow, and its software is now used in, I think, over 2,000 clinical research sites and academic centers around the world. So, and it's been sold twice since that time. So we invested in another software company called Clinically, worked with that developer to develop regulatory software, regulatory and compliance. There's the submission of all the documents is very tedious. And if you're working with specialists, if we're working with the lab over here at Strong or a lab someplace else, or you have to have a lab director's CV, he has to sign a document, a delegation log. And so all that stuff was paper. We had to mail the paper to them, and hopefully they found it and signed it and sent it back to us. That could add weeks to the timeline of starting. And the key with this is time. You have to do things quickly. So we were able to get mobile technology that you can sign on a phone and get those documents signed. It was just like life-saving. Now, this is about 20 years after the rest of the world has been doing that, but to have it finally happen in our industry was really dramatic. And we helped write that software as well with those developers. So they're working on an e-source program right now. EMR doesn't really work for clinical trials so well, as you know, because you can't customize it to what you need for that each protocol, which is the key to make sure you collect the right data. So, you need to, what I've learned from this is if you need something done, get somebody to create it if it doesn't exist, because it can be created. It's expensive, but it really can work very well. Let's see. So yeah, I have I'm a step behind my slides, I'm sorry. Okay, so this was the two companies that actually there's others we did as well. We also invested in a company called Quality Management System, QRS, that helps track queries. My son actually created that software, and Lab Logger, which helps us log the samples in to make sure electronically. What happens with many of the data points is it's time sensitive. What time was the blood drawn? What time was it spun? What time was it frozen? What time was it poured? And all that is manual, and if you're doing that after you've done all the drawing, you're not doing it accurately. So having, again, a barcode scanner that would integrate for that purpose. The quality management software, there often are things that you miss, and if we have a person reviewing in real time the data, and if someone misses something, you've got to get a message to that person to fix it. Well, this automates that process. We'll send them an email saying, you missed the box on page 3, go back into the system and check it. So you could also track your performance, though, with that. Once you have that data, you can see, what did you do? Are you missing? What we found is we're missing the top of the page most of the time. You missed the top checkbox. So change that form, move that box around. So you can improve, if you look at real-time data as to what's going on, you can improve your process. It was key to improving what we did. Planning and metrics. I had several good mentors in my career who really taught me the importance of planning ahead, setting goals, and measuring how you're going to get there. Looking to where you want to be is key. If you're standing still, you're losing ground, was what my mentors told me, Dr. Versinger, first medical director, and you have to measure your performance to improve. You can't improve unless you know where you are. So we worked together to create annual goals for the company, and we would look at and we'd share them with the staff at a State of the Union we have every year. We also would take the time to celebrate our hard work and recognize the staff with awards. And we share the information about our metrics. How many new areas of research did we do this year? How many calls did our recruiters make? And what number does it take to get the people in? What's a reasonable workload for each person that will both maintain quality and sanity and cover expenses? All those things are important. All this data was collected and shared with our staff monthly so that the expectations can be clear and people feel invested and recognized. Seeking out peers in your field who can share best practices with is really key to our success too. We joined the Alliance of Multi-Specialty Research, which was a loose network of independent sites around the country, about 20 of us, from Texas to California. And as a network, we worked together to share best practices in the industry, and we were able to hire developers who could help locate more trials for us too. Each site was individually owned and operated though. And we worked with many medical experts in their community over the years, several MDs as you mentioned on site, and some of the practice in the building. We also worked with a local neurologist, Dr. Joe Mann, who's a headache specialist, and was involved in the development of new category treatment for migraines, the CGRP inhibitors, which are really a novel compound that are revolutionary in taking care of people's migraines. I think we had more trials on migraines at one point in time than any site in the country. Okay, family. It actually was a family business. At one point, I think there were 11 family members working for us in various capacities. But primarily, I was fortunate to work with two of my sons. My son Adam joined the company in 2008. He had a business and marketing degree and drive and ambition to take us to the next level of business growth. He became the company president in 2016 as I planned for succession planning. And he grew the database from 18,000 to that current 50,000 with creative marketing. He was also responsible for his business development. He had a vision for growth. And he was instrumental in seeing that happen as he went from a staff of 30 to 80. In this industry, if you do good work, the work just comes to you typically. And the reputation for quality becomes known, and people will come looking for you, which was generally what happened. We also began collaborating more with community physicians and also working to increase the diversity in our trials as a challenge. As we grew, it became more important, and the FDA came out with some guidelines on increasing diversity. And that's still, it remains a challenge, but we just upped it to 20% in one of our recent trials, which was really key to be able to do. But you have to, again, look at different ways of doing that and how does it happen. My son Brendan is an industrial engineer, and he joined us in 2016. He had a background in Lean and Six Sigma and helped us sustain quality as we grew and developed the QRS software for us to track things and continue to improve. So it was really key to be able to find our own errors before somebody comes and finds them for you and fix them. It's always the best preferred way for, we're human, we're going to make errors. Minimizing them and recognizing them and fixing them and building in quality was the key. You could, again, track trends, as I mentioned. Giving back to the community has always been important to us, too. Creative outreach to dispel fears and myths about clinical trials is vital. We started a diabetes self-management program many years ago that was open to the public and free. It was an 8-week curriculum with sessions with a physician, with a dietitian, with an exercise personal trainer. And at the end of it, the subjects, I think they wanted something. You forget how hard it is for diabetics to know what to eat. They wanted the dietitian to come live with them, I think. They would say, can we have another session with a dietitian? Can we have another session with a dietitian? So you clearly recognize the struggle that people clearly have. We would do cooking classes and teach them how to cook healthy. We signed up for a CSA with the share program with the community when we did weight loss studies and have dinners and have them come. The weight loss participants got to come and pick up their vegetables every week and be exposed to vegetables they'd never heard of or perhaps never even tried, which was fun. We offered a free screening program that's still ongoing for open to the community with fingerstick A1C, glucose, cholesterol, along with weight, blood pressure, etc. And this again would help to build the database and also expose people to research. What clinical trials are really like for a participant. There can be many misconceptions and fear of the unknown, so it's really important to dispel that. We would find that people would just, if they came in for a relatively straightforward study, like a device study where they just had to do a tube of blood, they'd say, oh, this isn't so bad. I actually have migraines. Could I do a trial like that? And of course, that was when you expose them to what really happens, that some of the misconceptions go away and they become more comfortable. It can take a lot of time to become familiar with the regulations for clinical trials. I think it takes about a year to develop a good solid study coordinator because there's so many intricacies. And learning how to analyze a protocol that may not be written clearly. English is a second language. I think it's very common for many of the people who write the protocols, where an and or an or and an inclusion criteria can make the difference between yes and no and be really tricky and easy for an inexperienced coordinator to miss. And it's too critical to have that happen. And the trials are much more complex. As the pharma company collected attempt to collect as much data as possible, leading to multiple complexities. Adaptive protocol design, you may have heard of, where the protocol phase actually changes while it's ongoing. So all of a sudden, the people who can be in it from that once a certain parameter is met are different from the people who were in it when you started. So you have to change all your tools and change your way of thinking and really be alert to when that can happen overnight, when you've got people on a schedule for a protocol that's not what it was yesterday. So that creates its own challenges. We created our own internal training program, RCR University, where we have multiple presentations on file from different folks. We originally did a lot of just shadowing and mentoring, and people do not learn from shadowing. It's a very ineffective teaching method, I think. I've learned over time. It's done originally. We developed competencies to ensure the staff did understand all the aspects that they needed to do, and we're following the processes in a standard manner. Because if you don't teach them what the standard manner is, they're not going to collect it in a standard manner. They're going to do it the way they think is right, which may or may not be right. So we learned what methods help with ongoing education and developing the competencies. We offered certifications for all of our study coordinators through the Association of Clinical Research Professionals, which is a requirement of working 2 years as a coordinator before you can take the exam, and then we would pay for the exam. We also worked with ongoing coaches for management training for our emerging leaders. People don't automatically know how to become a leader. You really need to give them the tools to help them be able to do that. Ongoing development is important. Practicing to be your best doesn't happen overnight, just like the athletes need to practice, so do we all. So as part of our vision for the future, we saw trends in the industry over the past 5 years that were changing, and site networks across the country were becoming the norm. Many of these independent sites that we work with to share best practices had merged and formed large site networks. There's a couple, Meridian, Velocity, that have over 100 sites that are all now under one roof. And this trend was growing, and as it grew larger, we could see that there were study opportunities that were going to the larger networks and not to the small independent sites. We were one of the one of the last man standing that were independent still. As the trend gathered, about 18 months ago, we decided we need to look at something different. And so we became part of this small niche network that's going to grow to about 15 to 18 sites. And RCR is the platform site, meaning our policies, our procedures, our standard operations will be adopted for anybody who joins us after this. So this led to change at RCR, and I'm now a consultant to the company and on the board of the directors of the new organization. We've grown to 8 sites now. We just opened an RCR Buffalo office. This is there. And that's about to begin the first trial this week, I think, using the methods and processes that we created here. I'm proud of the growth we've seen. Change is good, but it's hard. It's not always easy. I'm honored to have been able to share our story with you, and grateful to the nursing educators here that taught me so well and so much. So I think wherever life in your career takes you, I hope you always strive to be the best you can. Reach for that inner grit, the passion and perseverance that will bring to life each day. And who knows, you might end up being the next GOAT. Thank you so much. Any questions if anybody has? Anything they'd like to ask? I have a couple funny anecdotes I can share. If you don't have any questions, go ahead.
Is Adam still the president?
Yes. Well, actually, no. He resigned. He did not get along well with the CEO of the new network, so they had a parting of the ways. So, and Brendan planned to take his software elsewhere, so he stepped away too. So, it's a little different now. There still are. I have 3 nieces that still work at the company, but that's not quite as much family as it was. Thank you. Go ahead.
I have a question about how you integrate, or whether you integrate. I have a question about how or whether you integrate with researchers from U of R.
We actually, the only way we integrate with research from U of R, well, we often would collaborate on the same programs. Typically, they would call us and say, they need some help. They only were able to put 60 patients in this. Can you do the other 60? So that's how we collaborate. I think I look at us as really worker bees. And we are set up to do high volume very efficiently. I don't think that's necessarily the strength here to do high volume. So we had also had a lot of the investigators from here would come and work as sub-investigators on certain trials. We had participants, many of them came over. We were doing a smallpox trial, and many of the folks from the pox lab came over and got that vaccine because there wasn't one available to them. But we would work with the radiology department, Mark Adams. A lot of folks would actually end up helping us with the particularly unique studies that need to be done as part of the protocol. So we would collaborate with them on things where we didn't have the skill sets to do it, and they would, which was really great. We also helped Eastman Dental Center would access to help them recruit. So the recruitment system we had, we would offer to help. They would say, we need to find 200 people for this trial. Can you help us? And we have this infrastructure to do that. We did that for other sites around the country too, where they would have a particular need. And with VoIP, you can make the phone number be the Eastman Dental Center, and subjects wouldn't know and be able to be talked to by someone who was well trained. So that actually worked as a good pivot for us during, sometimes with business, you never know where the next study is going to come from. So you can look for other opportunities, again, to keep everybody on the payroll. We never laid anybody off in 30 years and never hope to have to do that. You feel a sense of responsibility when people are the employee and their livelihood depends on you. So
All right, I have maybe connecting later, but I also have one other question. Most of the trials that you talked about were device or pharmacologic.
Yes.
Do you do behavioral?
We do, yeah. We do some behavioral, not a ton, but we've done some. We had found a psychiatrist to work with us, but he didn't turn out to be as reliable as we'd hoped. It's difficult for people to do the ancillary, when they have another primary commitment, to come over and do it with the consistency the trials require rather. Yeah, we've done some. Actually, it turns out to be CBD for social anxiety. So there was a novel trial we did too. But we've just started doing some behavioral and are hoping to build that up.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Is there another question over here? I can just tell you. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I don't have any questions, but I just feel so inspired. I feel super inspired. I love when you said that if it doesn't exist, create it. And that's so motivating for me. And I also like the fact that when you were consulting with the lawyers, how you got rid of the first two, because you knew your stuff, and that's so empowering. That's so wonderful that you knew what you were talking about. And so thank you for being here.
Oh.
I loved it.
Thank you. That made it all worth it. Well, any other questions? I can just tell you one funny story. So, actually, one of our investigators, she's a sweetheart. She was a rheumatologist as well as internal medicine. And primarily she was working on the arthritis studies. We did all the Humira biologics as well as a lot of osteoarthritis studies. But she was also, when there wasn't one of those studies, she would serve and do the physical exam and assessment for whatever trial was happening. And this was an erectile dysfunction trial, but she wasn't paying attention. So she went in to see the patient and didn't really pay attention to what study he was there for. And her first question to him was, "How's your morning stiffness?" Thinking, and the patient just looked at her like, she asked one or two other questions, and then she finally said, "I'm guessing you're not here for the arthritis study," which was the case. Actually, we did the other device study that was actually testing. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm interested in the part of your story where you focused on the shift into creating a business as a nurse. And do you remember what was going on in your head at the time that you decided to take that leap?
Well, I do sort of. Well, I knew we had successful business. It was going really well. I had 10 trials underway. I had been paid in advance for a long-term, we did the hypertension optimal treatment trial that was a 4-year outcome trial, and we had only done 6 months of it, and they had paid us ahead for like a year's worth of work, and I thought, I'm not going to give up. That just wasn't an option. So I thought, I think we can do this. I mean, I'd made the transition by leaving the medical center and going to the independent medical practice. So how different could it be from that, I thought. And I knew on the back of a napkin that we had enough money to, well, it's funny. As it turned out, the medical group didn't have the money that we'd been paid about $30,000 in advance that had not been used on credit, that we actually had $30,000 on credit. And they had all this equipment in this suite that they had renovated that they were going to get rid of. So there was exam tables and a telephone system and a front desk, a reception desk. We actually took the reception desk. So we took everything off. We used the phone system, the exam tables, the otoscopes, and everything. So when I started, I had no outlay of expense except a lease to sign. I just had to sign away my firstborn child in my house, I think, to sign the lease. But it was, It was okay. I had the confidence that I knew enough about what I was doing and that there was enough revenue coming in to cover my salary and the physician's salary, and I thought we can do this, and it works well, and it was going well, and I was having fun, so I thought, well, why not? I guess the thought of failure never crossed my mind, which is, I think now, oh my God. But it just didn't, I knew it was working. And so it was funny, they came out, the total of all the things we took came out to $29,900. So they gave us a check for $100 and all the equipment. So that was actually helped us financially start with really very little risk or debt. And I knew I had revenue coming in from these trials. So I guess I was thinking, how hard could it be?
Have you ever thought about writing a book?
I probably should. I haven't. I haven't. I've been told to do that about my online dating stories, but I haven't. I won't go there. Good. 1 minute. Okay, we're just time for one more if there is. Well, thank you very much. This was wonderful. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are so thankful that you took time out of your schedule to give the lecture, and we're so honored to call you an alumni. So thanks for all that you do. We said this was going to be an excellent 66 Clare Dennison, and you delivered. So thank you. Thank you. So now, as we transition, it's time to eat. It is time for lunch. So I invite each of you, I hope that you can all attend. We will be celebrating lunch at Everett's Lounge, and we have a great lunch ceremony planned. So hope to see you all as you walk down to Everett's Lounge. Thank you. Thank you.